This isn't a video that I'd thought I'd be making. Not because it's about guns or politics or anything of the sort, but rather because it has to do with Markiplier. Markiplier has a lot of influence with the size of his following, and I think he's aware of that, but he's not very well informed. That's usually not an issue, though, as while Markiplier may not know much about the world around him, his channel isn't one dedicated to discussing sensitive topics, or politics, or anything else like that. He's a gaming channel, and spends much of his time devoted to making penis jokes in prop hunt sessions with his friends. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with Markiplier's content as a whole. I myself have been a long-time fan of his Let's Plays. His childish humor and antics are, for the most part, enjoyable and somewhat relaxing to watch. Everything a Let's Play should be. Unlike most commentaries, this isn't about Markiplier's content or even him as a person, but rather this one very misinformed video. If this had been on a smaller channel, I likely would have ignored it completely, but as I said, Mark has a massive influence with his large following. With a smaller channel, one misinformed video is simply one misinformed video, but when that video has the sort of outreach that someone like Markiplier has, it's no longer just a video, it's potentially dangerous. The video of discussion is his recent video on gun control, so let's get right into it.
Hey guys, I wanted to make a video that's a little out of the norm from what I usually do. This is in relation to the Stoneman Douglas shootings.
Just a side note, it's generally a bad idea to discuss topics of this nature shortly after tragic events, as those events can affect your emotional state. The more emotional you are, the more irrational and illogical you are. To clarify, there's nothing wrong with making videos giving your support to victims of a tragedy, but you shouldn't make it political.
And first and foremost, I have to say that I'm incredibly proud of the way the kids have been handling themselves, how they've been demonstrating all across the country in the organization of marches and talks with people in political spheres.
Personally, I'm a little appalled by the whole matter myself. Not with the children, mind you, but the fact that there are people willing to use the victims of a tragedy as the weapons of tyranny is utterly disgusting to me. The heart is deceitful above all things. People who are emotionally compromised are easy to manipulate, and that's exactly what's happening. It's disgusting. Proud isn't a word I'd use to describe it.
And usually I stay out of anything that has to do with politics or religion or anything of the above. But in this particular case, I felt I needed to say something because some of my fans have been affected by this. And some of my fans are out there demonstrating about this. And I wanted to say something because I don't feel it's right that kids have to be the ones on the front lines of this fight.
Nor do I. As I said, it's disgusting what's being done with them. As for the rest of what you said, you're obviously emotionally compromised from the whole matter, and that's fine. It's perfectly okay for you to feel remorse and grief for the victims, but there's a difference in mourning for the loss and making an emotionally driven attack.
And I wanted to throw in my support and give my thoughts on the matter for whatever that may be worth. But to give you a background, I have an extensive background and experience with guns. My father was a 24-year Army man. He was a member of the NRA. He taught me about guns from a very early age, and he taught me to respect them and how to properly handle guns. I have gone to the shooting range many times. I've shot all kinds of guns. My dad even built muzzleloader rifles as a hobby. So when I say these things, just know that it's not coming from a place of ignorance.
I won't say that Markiplier is outright lying here about what he said about his family owning guns and such. But as you will see very shortly, he knows nothing about guns. If his family did in fact use firearms as frequently as he claims, it would seem that he learned nothing about guns from his family.
And first and foremost, I want to say that I don't think people should be able to access assault rifles.
Military grade or consumer grade. Military grade assault rifles have 3 modes of fire with single round burst and full auto. but they're already banned for purchase on the market thanks to the automatic weapons ban. What classifies a consumer-grade assault rifle, however, is the grip. You have standard grip rifles and pistol grips. If the rifle has a pistol grip, then it's technically an assault rifle. I say technically because it's really not an assault rifle at all. In fact, assault rifle isn't even a proper gun term. It's loosely defined, and what an assault rifle even is often under debate because it was more or less made up. Made up by people in the media that wanted a scary name to call guns rather than calling them by the proper terminology. He came in with an assault rifle. Sounds better and is easier to say than something like he was using a black .22 rifle with pistol grip and laser sight attachment.
There's no beating around the bush. There's no kidding about it. There's no exaggerations. Assault rifles exist solely to kill people. And you could say the same thing about all guns, but assault rifles especially, they don't have any purpose in hunting.
To bear arms, the right of the people shall not be infringed. Funny, I must have missed the part about guns only being allowed for the purposes of hunting. Like it or not, in our modern society, guns are the standard of weaponry. People aren't going around the streets getting into sword fights with one another anymore. Within the Bill of Rights, the Second Amendment is all that protects the other 9 amendments. To protect one's self, family, and property, and liberty, one must be able to properly arm themselves. It is the right of the people to do so, to protect themselves from evil, even if that evil is their own government.
They have a purpose in self-defense only to the point where they can kill multiple people with a lot of bullets in a very large magazine.
And here's where we see that Markiplier doesn't know what he's talking about, so far as where guns are concerned. He just spouted off all the media tripe you'll hear from the so-called news outlets that are just as woefully ignorant as he is, if not worse. First off, what gun is he even talking about? Remember, assault weapon isn't a real term, and guns of all kinds can easily be modified to have larger magazines. Second, though he didn't outright state this, he said the phrase kill multiple people with a lot of bullets, which I'm taking to mean that he thinks people can buy automatic weapons. Newsflash, we can't. Not legally anyway. A lot of people have been misinformed by the media into thinking that the general public can buy automatics, but we can't. It's been illegal for years. Personally, I'm all for repealing the automatic weapons ban myself, as it's unconstitutional, but that's another story. I think you get my point here. Side note, semi-automatic weapon includes all firearms. It's not directly brought up by Markiplier here, but this is something that's very, very commonly misunderstood thanks to the media's bias against firearms. Semi-automatic simply means that you pull the trigger and one bullet comes out, then the gun puts a bullet back into the chamber for you so you can pull the trigger and one bullet comes out. That's it. And it includes pretty much all firearms except for a few such as lever action rifles, which some could argue is semi-automatic, and also revolvers, which again can be argued to be semi-automatic as well, even though it requires one additional step.
And I know I'm going out on a limb and just saying this outright, but I'm 100% in the field that we need to ban assault rifles.
For what purpose exactly? And what would that ban even look like? Are you going to ban pistol grips? Black spray paint, maybe? This is why you shouldn't come into a conversation emotionally driven. You just end up looking like you have no idea what you're talking about.
And I know that people will say that gun control laws are not the thing that can change this, or at least they'll say that it's not the only thing that can change this. But in my mind, why not do everything in our power to try to protect our kids, or our people, or our fellow countrymen, or our neighbors?
Because people die, and that's the world we live in. It's hard to hear, but it's the truth. You can either live in a world that's free or a world that's safe. You can't have both. I want to be free, and I'm willing to accept the risks that come with it. Life is a gift, but it can end at any moment. We can't always be there, we can't save everyone. There will always be evil, and someone is always going to die. This is the reality of life. I understand that it can be hard to accept that everyone is going to die. It's hard to accept that people will kill one another, but you can't let your grief blind you from the reality. What you're proposing would kill far more than it would ever save. The CDC has reported that privately owned firearms save countless lives more than they ever take. As sad as it is, the reason that people shoot up schools is because guns aren't allowed anywhere near them. Children in these schools are little more than sitting ducks or fish in a barrel. There's nothing there to protect them. If you're a deranged shooter, you're not going to attack a gun show where you know everyone is armed. You're going to attack the one place you know where no one can defend themselves: a school. You want to talk about measures to protect our children. There's a proposal floating around for teachers to be able to conceal carry firearms for this sort of emergency. Is it a perfect solution? No, but it's at least attacking the root of the problem. Criminals will always be able to purchase guns. Banning them would only disarm the public. It would make matters worse, not better.
And in the avenue of trying to attack this from both sides, why don't we stop stigmatizing mental health? Why don't we stop treating it like some sort of problem that people just need to bear alone? That should be the first and foremost of everything, not just in these, but in general, because there's so many people out there suffering silently with mental illnesses that need help and are so afraid to go out and get it because of the way we treat it in this country.
This I can agree on, and I believe it's Markiplier's strongest point in the video. So, rather than dispute it, I'll simply provide an answer to his question. The reason that we as a society do so little for those suffering from mental health issues is due to two things. The first is because there is no easy solution to mental health. It's something which requires us as people to help our fellow man. We can't simply do a march or donate to a charity. We actually have to look out for one another, and dare I say, even love one another. Most people are too self-centered to do that, though. They'd rather toss some money to a charity so they don't feel like the scum they are, rather than actually care about the people in need around them. The second reason is because it requires us to accept the reality that the world is full of evil and neglectful people. These people that commit these evil acts didn't wake up suddenly one morning with the intent to harm people. It's a matter of bad parenting, fatherless homes, neglectful parents, abusive relationships, and abusive parents. These things are a reality of life, but we do so little to nothing for many of those that suffer through it. If you need an example, just look at Boogie 2988. He grew up in a fatherless home with an abusive mother, and he wound up spending half his life trying to eat himself to death because people refused to accept that the mother was as evil as she was. You want to talk about stigma. There was a video I saw that people were sharing on Facebook where a teenage boy, about 14 or so, calls the police and says his mother is beating him. An officer arrives and asks the boy where he got the idea to call the cops, and he says that his friends told him that he should. Rather than taking the boy in and investigating the situation, the officer threatens the boy, telling him that if he ever calls the police on his mother again because she hit him, that he'll come back down personally and beat him. And people were praising this story, saying how amazing the mother and officer was, and how evil the child was for trying to get his brave, strong mother in trouble. They praised this story, and we wonder why shootings happen or why suicide rates are so high.
And also, why do we require more licensing and registration for cars than we do for guns?
We don't. That's just some media ignorance you're spouting off. If I wanted to buy a handgun or rifle for self-defense, I would first need to go through a federal background check from the FBI. Then, go through a gun safety course and get a certificate stating that I know how to properly handle firearms. Then, I would need to get a permit to carry. If it's a rifle, it'll be a different permit than I'll need for a handgun. There's different permits for open carry and conceal carry. And after all of that, there's still a waiting period before the gun can be given to me, even after I've purchased it. Buying a gun is incredibly difficult if you're doing it legally. In contrast, the car that I'm currently driving just showed up in my driveway one day. I woke up and my mom told me that my aunt bought a new car and gave me her old one to use. And that was it.
I know that people abide very closely by the Second Amendment, and me as a proud American, I'm very proud of our Constitution, but at the same time, there has to be some measure of control. I know that people want to be able to bear arms, and I respect that. I come from a family that was all about that, but that doesn't mean that we can't have some measure of control over these extremely dangerous tools.
There already is far too much control if you ask me, but that's another topic. You act as though guns are just raining from the sky and people are getting into gunfights like it's the Wild West. Movies, that is. Wild West style gunfights never actually happened. That was just Hollywood's romanticized version. But that's also another story.
In the end, people will say that I'm spouting ignorance, or that I don't know what I'm talking about, or that I'm saying things that are wrong, and that is fine.
You are, and preemptively acknowledging your very obvious lack of knowledge throughout this video doesn't make it any less ignorant.
But right now, the only thing that I can think of is, why shouldn't we be doing absolutely everything in our power to help? Now is not the time for talk. Now is not the time for empty promises. Now is the time to do something for the people that are suffering most from this. And I want to end this by saying that these kids that are out demonstrating, they are an inspiration. An absolute inspiration, not just to me, but to everybody watching across the country. And if you're watching this and you are out there demonstrating, or you're organizing marches, or you're talking to the people who are supposedly in power of these decisions, keep it up. Because the world is listening, the country is listening. People will try to ignore you and people will try to dismiss your opinion, but you are the future of this country. And you are the future of the world, and your actions dictate what our future will be. So don't give up the fight. Stay strong. And thanks for watching. Bye.
You're a very good guy, Mark. I certainly won't argue that you don't care about these people. You may not be overly informed, but you're very passionate and loving towards others. It's why I never imagined you'd be on my chopping block like this. I'm sure that the list of things we disagree on is miles long, but you seem to always come from a place of kindness. This is an admirable trait, but it's also what led me to dispute this video of yours. Your love of people and the grief of those lost has momentarily blinded you. I can understand feeling hurt by this and wanting so desperately to do something, anything even. But what you've done is come out in an emotional charge to attack an enemy you can't even see because you've been blinded by your grief. You haven't the foggiest idea of what you're saying, but try to act as though you do. In the rare chance that you actually see this, I want to say to you that I don't think you're fully aware of the sort of influence you have with an audience of your size. Spreading all this misinformation is doing far more harm than good, and that's why I had to make this video. I don't have the reach that you have, but one less misinformed person makes this video worth making. In the end, I'll say I don't think you're a bad person. You're simply misguided by emotions and ignorant of the truth.